wash it up, then you will smell something that's like big smoke rub. So, you pass them around, take the leaves, wash it up.
What's it called again, sorry?
There's a peppermint. We call them peppermint trees. I mean, but the Europeans, when they came here, named them peppermint. They're not related to peppermint at all. They're a myrtle. They also get called river myrtles. And traditionally we would light a hot fire, and then we would put the green leaves, branches of the green leaves onto the fire and breathe in the aromatic smoke. And there's been a lot of work done recently about the therapeutic benefits of smoke in these circumstances. Not horrible toxic smoke, like burning plastics and things, but burning natural wood smokes, and of course we were choosing woods and leaves because of their therapeutic values. So the kids would be all lined up in the winter and all inhaling the smoke like crazy. So that medicine is growing in just about in everybody's street or backyard, and it's all for free. And you can also take a few of the leaves and put them in a bowl and put hot water on and inhale the steam that way. Because not many of us are going to light a fire and then chuck the green branches on these days. We'll have the city of Swan or wherever you live around in a flash. You can't light a fire. Of course we used fire a lot, and we used fire to shape the landscape. But it's been illegal to burn in the time that we would choose to burn here in Western Australia since about 1837, because we would do hot season burns. So we would burn during the season of Birak and Bunuroo. Birak is one of our 6 seasons, and we have 6 seasons, not 4. And if you think about how we divide the seasons, it makes much more sense than thinking it is summer, winter, autumn, spring, or whatever here. I always get a big kick out of, sort of somebody announcing on the 1st of March that it's the first day of autumn, and you look outside and it's 190 in the water bag, and and the hint of cool weather is a long time in the future. So we would say Gerran, or our autumn season, doesn't start until it gets colder after the hot season, after Bunuroo. So towards the end of Bunuroo, you suddenly start having cooler mornings and then cooler evenings, and then the daytime temperature will drop, and then you'll get the first autumn rains. And that's when you've transitioned into Gerran autumn for us. So we're relying on what's happening in the environment to tell us change of season. So emus start laying their eggs at the start of Gerran. They start laying after those first autumn rains. And it's just a coincidence, and this is the way the universe does things, that at the time that the emus lay their eggs, the emu appears in the night sky in the Milky Way as the dark shape, and it starts off looking like the emu sitting on the eggs. So it's great fun having emus here and collecting the emu eggs, and we blow the eggs so that we can do something with the shell, but we don't waste the yolk, we use them in cooking. So they weigh between about 600 and 900 grams. And so that's 10 to 12 eggs. They're not as strong as duck eggs. They're quite mild flavoured. They're more like a chicken egg. So it's not gamey or meaty in any way, shape or form. Right. And they make the most amazing omelettes and scrambled eggs, and that's what you call a big breakfast. That's for everyone to share. So, yes, food is out there around us all the time. And we would move across the land according to our 6 seasons. So here in this season of Gerran, actually we've moved into Muckaroo now. We've moved into Muckaroo winter, and at the end of Muckaroo, the emus will stop laying their eggs. And the poor man there, he tries to gather his eggs into a nest. A female will lay an egg every 2 to 3 days, and he will start gathering them. And under normal circumstances, when he has enough, he will sit down on them. So it's
like the scarlet turkey, like that actually they sit, the males sit on the nest.
Yeah.
And so they actually have, do they have, like the chicken eggs as well, do they have to get to a certain temperature in the mound to actually then hatch?
yes, so nothing happens really with the egg until the male sits on them and starts incubating them. And so he has to sit on them for 59 days. And during this time, he doesn't eat or drink or go to the toilet. So when we had males sitting on the eggs there, we used to try and tempt him with food and stuff. He just wouldn't take it.
That was his job.
That was his job. He'd stand up and stretch his legs and rearrange his eggs and then sit down again, but he didn't leave them. In the bush with chicks, it's a bloke. And sometimes you'll see 2 or 3 male emus with all their chicks gathered behind them, their broods. Oh, here's some more yummy things. Thank you. Okay. And and they will adopt orphan chicks as well, as long as they are smaller than their own chicks. So sometimes you'll see 1 or 2 men, and they seem to have like 30 or 40 babies with them, because they will have adopted, orphan chicks as they go. And so it's quite a sight to see when you see the men with their chicks. But you see them, the blokes walking along with all these chicks coming along behind them, and it's sort of reminded of the women sort of gossiping over the fence when they're hanging over the washing.
And what do the females do then? Do they just go off and have a party, or do they
actually do. They find another bloke.
Sounds like a plan.
All care, no responsibility. Yes, it's a good life for a female.
Laying eggs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And did you all see the emu egg on the middle of the table there? That really dark green colour. They're fabulous colour. Fabulous colour. So, of course, during this time of the year, we're eating emu eggs. And surprisingly, we're also eating emus, because they're hanging around nests and things like that, so that makes them easy to get. So, and as long as you get them before the eggs have hatched, you're not making anybody an orphan. And you'd probably only take 1 or 2 in a season. And if you want a lesson in how to cook an emu, no oven. And you're going to cook the bird whole.
And the feathers would be quite...
The feathers are amazing.
Like they're beautiful, but to remove them, like that would be interesting.
Oh yeah, we pluck them off. Yeah, we pluck them out. Yeah. But if you get an emu feather, you'll notice that every shaft has 2 feathers on it. So they are amazing feathers. And I had to give one young Aboriginal man the rounds of the kitchen once, because he turned up with an emu feather tattoo, and I'd given him emu feathers to take to his tattoo artist, but he'd only put 1 feather on each shaft, and I said, it's not right, go back and fix it. You cannot walk around with a tattoo looking like that. People will think that you don't know anything. And the other things we'd be eating during Gerran, when the emus start laying their eggs, would be the long yams, the warren, Diasporia hascifolia. And who knew that before European settlement, all along the Swan River, we had huge yam gardens. Who knew? That was going to tell you at school, aren't they? And there's nothing up along the Derby area and the Swan River to say, oh, this was the site of an enormous yam garden. But we did. I mean, you can see the remnants of the yam gardens up at Walyunga National Park. And when you get there, you know, you sort of need a good guide to tell you that that's what you're looking at, because what you're looking at is banks faced with stones. And so the women, as they created their yam gardens, when they dug, they would take stones, and if they had banks around them, they would shore them up with the stones, and they'd actually bring more stones in, so that when they weren't there to protect their gardens, it stopped the water from rushing through and washing away the gardens. And these gardens were big enough that the early settlers actually marked them on their maps. So if you look at some of those early maps from 1829, they have got marked on them warren holes, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that these were rabbit burrows. But of course we didn't have any bunnies then. They came much later. So the warren is what we call that yam warren, and they're talking about holes because of the way we cultivated the yams. So if you were just to go and find a single yam plant in the bush, and I have done this, and get down on your knees with your one or your digging stick, and then you're sort of holding your digging stick with one hand and loosening the earth, and you with the other hand you're scooping out the soil. You're following a little green tendril from the aerial part of the plant down through the earth, and that will take you to the yam, which might be a metre down. So you are loosening, scooping, and don't break that tendril, because if you break the tendril, you'll
get the yam.
And I think I worked for hours and got 3 yams.
Wow.
So if anyone were relying on me to bring home dinner that night, they were going to be very hungry. So our old girls were much smarter than that, because when they created these gardens, what they would do is that they would collapse the soil. You know, they'd dig holes and they'd collapse the soil and take all the tubers out. And because they were continually aerating the soil and moving it around, it was easy for these yams to grow. And they would grow really long. The ones that I was digging out were about this long. So like this, and the weeds will spread. So the yams would do that as well. So they would naturally increase the size of those yam gardens as we disturb the soil. So we'd be collapsing that soil, and we'd end up with holes, hollows, and humps, hillocks. And that was how the yam gardens were often described, as humps and hillocks. But of course they didn't last very long after European settlement, because they occupied the good alluvial soil along the river that the Europeans wanted for themselves. So turf out the yam gardens and replace them with their own plants. And of course the Europeans didn't like them for another reason. That's because they couldn't ride their horses through because of the humps and hollows. And that was one of the things that protected the yam plants as well, because kangaroos, for example, and emus won't go into uneven ground because it's too easy to break a leg. So they will avoid those areas and leave the food alone. So we would only tend those yam gardens twice a year, once during Gerrin and once during Cumberrung, which is late spring, about October, November. The rest of the time, Mother Nature is taking care. And so because of the humps and hillocks, the animals keep away, and because we've shored up the banks, the water comes in but doesn't wash away the plants, and those hollows will collect leaf litter and water, and so you're nurturing your yam garden as well. So it was a perfect system. Agriculture was very widespread amongst Aboriginal people in Australia, and there's a great book you can read called Dark Emu, It's by Bruce Pascoe. So if you want to write it down later, just ask me at the end. And he has explored Aboriginal agriculture, but as it was observed by the Europeans when they first arrived. So it's not our traditional folklore that says we did these things. He's gone back through early settler reports and diaries and journals and picked out the bits that describe what was going on in the landscape. So Major Mitchell, well-known Australian explorer, for example, wrote in his journal, "I have just ridden through 9 miles of cut and stooped millet." And then he wrote, "And I wonder who could have done that and what they were going to do with it." And you think, what? Of course people have done it and they were going to eat it. But such was the attitude towards Aboriginal people at the time that they just would not countenance that we had any agricultural knowledge or traditions at all. So what was there was ignored or destroyed. So you might also read about the Murnong, and I think there was a 2-part series on the ABC called Australia, and it was about that early settlement time. It wasn't particularly well done, but one thing that they did showcase was, the guy coming into his new land, his new property that he owned, and he wanted to put his crops in, so he dug up all the little Murnong tubers. It's often called a daisy, and the Murnong has edible tubers. And when the Aboriginal people came along, they just couldn't believe their eyes, because he'd just pulled all these things out and thrown them to one side, and that was their food for the season that had been discarded. And there were early settlers took artists with them when they drove their sheep and cattle inland. And there's a famous painting of a field of Murnong, all in flower, yellow daisies just carpeting the ground, and it's showing Aboriginal women with their baskets. They had the headband and the baskets behind them. They'd turn up the tuber, and there's grandmother, mother, daughter, take the middle tuber, and then they'd plant the tuber again. And so it was a very sustainable way of harvesting, because we didn't destroy the plant. But of course, along came the sheep, and again, because the soil was so beautifully tilled, one explorer wrote that the soil was as fine as ashes and smelled like roses. So, it was beautiful soil, and so the Murnong thrived and fed the local people. It was a starchy tuber with great carbohydrate food. But the sheep could not only eat the tops, they could actually get the tubers out because the soil was so fine, and which they did, and then they, with their nice little hoofy feet, compacted the soil. So within 3 seasons, the Murnong was gone. The soil was compacted, and Aboriginal people were complaining that they had never seen the water run across the top of the soil before. So that compacting of the soil meant that the water wasn't going in. So these huge changes were wrought to the Australian landscape and the way of life for Aboriginal people really quickly. And so these big food sources were gone, and people were displaced and dispossessed and pushed to the margins, and that's not counting the massacres. Governor Phillips started off wanting to befriend the local Aboriginal people, and I think in the end he was countenancing people going out on hunting raids, killing Aboriginal people and handing out blankets infected with smallpox just to deal with the Aboriginal problem. So, you know, it was a pretty dark history. And you might recall in 2019 that there was a statement from the Heart, a group of Aboriginal people that Malcolm Turnbull had sent off to Uluru to write a preamble to the Constitution that acknowledged Aboriginal people, because we're currently not mentioned in the Constitution at all. I mean, how could we be? Because when the British came here, they declared this land terra nullius, an empty land, because they didn't regard us even as people. You know, some of the early depictions of Aboriginal people that went back to Europe showed us as having tails. And we were supposed to be the missing link between apes and man. You know, sort of all sorts of fanciful stuff like that, which justified what they did, which was to colonise without making a treaty, which was law in Britain at the time. And we're still the only British colony where a treaty has never been made. So the statement from the Heart, from Uluru, said three things. It said voice. We want a voice in the Australian Parliament for Aboriginal people. We want a treaty, and we want truth. So we want the truth to be told about what happened when the Europeans came and what they did to Aboriginal people. Not to make people feel bad, but to acknowledge. You cannot heal until you acknowledge what has happened in the past. So, voice, treaty, truth. And NAIDOC week this week has been postponed from July to November because of our friend the virus. And the theme this year is always was, always will be. And the bit that's not said but is understood, Aboriginal land. So it's still a great fight going on amongst Aboriginal people to get that recognition, to start to change things like the Constitution. I mean, if we can have same-sex marriage acknowledged by people, I think there's a lot of goodwill out there in the community for Aboriginal people. I'm sure we can have a referendum that will acknowledge Aboriginal people and change the Constitution. It depends on how these things are written though, because, you know, the referendum on the Republic failed because of the way the question was asked. So you have to try and get the politics out of it. Good luck with that. So we've still got a long way to go. But back to our food. You know, we are natural storytellers and we can't help ourselves. Everything weaves together. Everything about our existence weaves together. So you will find me weaving stories into Bush Tucker as well. So different times of the year we're doing different things, and not everything that we see in front of us here comes from Western Australia. But I'll point out which things are West Australian, and we're going to try lots of different things. So the decorations are all edible, of course. This is native spinach, often called warrigal greens. And if you put some of this into your garden, you will always have warrigal greens because it will keep popping up. And, you know, you can beat it back with a stick, but it'll pop up again. So great to have out in your garden because, you know, especially at this time of the year, this is its favourite time of the year, dies off a bit in summer. You can just walk out the back and get some beautiful spinach leaves. And it actually, in my opinion, tastes better than ordinary spinach. And yeah, it will just grow and grow and grow and grow. So we'll pass these around.
Do your emus go for that?
Sorry?
Just out of curiosity, some people give spinach and greens or grow them near their chooks. So
Yeah.
would that enhance the eggshells for you, do they go for that, or are they on a different kind of diet?
No, they are.
Just curious because
Yeah.
you know, if it's occurring naturally, it might be
Yeah.
something that they like.
Well, it grows along the coast.
Oh, okay.
So you don't see a lot of emus down the coast, but you do see some. And they love eating the grevillea leaves as well. And they like the grevillea flowers. They like the soursop flowers, you know, the oxalis flowers as well. They'll fight each other for them. So yes, to the answer to your question, they love the greens, but you can't grow it near them because as soon as it sticks its head up, it's gone. But you know, introduced weeds, they you know, they don't like them. They can grow in there, but they'll just ignore them. Not edible, they say, because it doesn't belong here. So let's pass them around. If you want to, you can pick off a bit of a leaf and chomp it. Now,
You hold it, yeah.
this one here, this one's another
It
native.
looks like it's normal
I'm
spinach,
sure
English
you've all
spinach, isn't
got these in your garden or somewhere nearby. And this, of course, is gelatin wax. And we can use this in cooking, but you don't use the flowers. You're using the very little leaf tips at the end, and that's like a citrus flavouring. So mostly used cooking fish.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. What did you say about fish?
You use the tips of the gelatin wax like that,
Yeah.
those young tips, as a citrus flavouring, and used mostly for cooking fish. I will barbecue a whole fish. I just make some slits in it, put the gelatin wax there, and into the cavity, and wrap it up in some alfoil. Stick it on the barbie. The alfoil is replacing the paper bark that we would wrap fish in to cook. We can't really put paper bark on the barbie because when we cook in paper bark, we bury it in the ashes. So if the air gets to it, it'll set fire to it.
We would do that with peat. We
Yeah.
do peat and newspaper and layers with salmon, which is really good.
Yes. And does it flavour the fish?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
beautiful, smoky,
Yeah.
gorgeous piece
And
of
that's
salmon.
what the paper bark does too. You get those lovely smoky, charred flavours through. But
Have your flowers then.
no, it's just the leaf tips.
Yeah, but the flowers they go in salads. They add lots of vitamin C and things in them.
No, we don't eat the flowers.
Oh,
Just this bit. They're a bit waxy to eat
okay.
because they're a wax flower, a local flower. They're a wax flower, so you can eat the nectar, but we don't eat the flowers. Just that very tip, and that's our citrus flavouring. So we can pass some gelatin wax around to everyone to find a leaf
Hold it
tip.
bar.
So it has to be on the tip, or can it just be any of the side shoot ones?
You see these little fresh tips coming
Right,
through? They're the
especially
best.
at the top. I want
But
one
if
of
you-
yours.
Here's some tips.
So how much would you need? If we had a pot of potato or something, how much or how many of the tips would you need to flavor it?
Oh, you can use quite a bit. If you're putting it with fish, put it in the slits and put it in the cavity. But you can
Even
use,
that has it.
practice will tell you how much to use. Some more of those going
That's
round.
nice.
It is this one.
But yeah, you sort of can't overdo it really.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, and that's growing all around you as well. So this one is a bush basil. It's not native to Western Australia, although you can grow it really easily. It's another one that will just grow and grow and grow and grow. And if it looks woody, just chop it up and stick the woody bits into some soil and it'll grow again. So It's one of those ones, the gift that keeps on giving. It's quite strong flavoured. If you wanted to use it without cooking, I'd blanch it first, and you can put it into salads and stir fries. You can dry it and use it as a pot herb. So just passing these around so that you can. Yeah. But you see that it's quite pungent. Yes.
So, Dale, what was the name of that one?
This gets called bush basil.
Smells pretty strong.
It's nice.
Plants
Basil.
it has a like a
little
long
victory.
purple flower.
Yeah. Peppery.
Peppery.
You know, a long flower spike with little purple flowers on it. Yeah.
I think I was born here but lived in Queensland for many years, and I think I've seen this on or something similar to this in on hikes in rainforest areas. The side of
Quite pungent, but when it's dried, it's not as
Not like
pungent.
bullfeed.
And blanching it, you just take some of those bitter oils out.
Can you make bubble cheese out of this?
Sorry?
Bubble cheese out of
Excuse me. If it's edible, you can make a tea with it if you like those flavours, yes. Well, you use it as a pot herb. Yes, so use it to flavour meats or vegetables. It gets called, it gets likened to basil when it's dried. It's probably a bit more subtle than the domesticated basil when it's dried, but still very nice.
Dale, can you make like a pesto with it?
You could easily.
Yeah, just grind it up
Yeah.
with the oil and find that something.
Yeah, you could
That'd be
easily.
quite good.
Yeah.
Beautiful, huh?
Yes, yes, and there's and the fresh herbs are always a little different to the dried herbs. You know, we sell a lot of dried herbs, but we grow a fair amount of them fresh as well, and they're just so different when they're fresh.
Yeah.
So we have an abundance of this fresh stuff out there. It just goes nuts, so that's good. I like that. But we've also got a plant out there which is called Prosthanthera incisor, which is cut leaf mint, but when it's dried it gets called a few different things, you know, sort of like dried mint, native oregano or native thyme, and it's got a cousin called Prosthanthera rotundifolia, so that's round leaf mint, and it's quite similar because they're both, you know, it's a same genus, different species. So they're very good it is for you because it is a more powerful antifungal and antibacterial than tea tree and tastes a heap better. And the leaves are extremely high in calcium. So, you know, a lot of our native plants would, you know, fall into these categories of superfoods, but they're just food, really. And we always, you know, the food we ate was our medicine. You know, our medicine came from the plant world, and we eat it as a preventative as well as a curative. So, lemon myrtle, very good for you. Lots of others are very good for you as well. This is pepperberry. Who likes hot things? Let's start with some hot things and then we'll cool you down.
I had a few, like about a few
When they're
of these things
loose
in
like this,
stuff.
it's
It's
hard
amazing,
to,
and I think like
to
never heard
smell
of some of this stuff.
their aromatics. Now you can't really, we'll get some in a jar and we'll pass that around for the people who don't want to eat one. Don't eat one unless you like hot things. Now be warned that this is sneaky because when you first chew it, all you're tasting are the aromatics. But wait for it, the heat is coming. Yeah.
Is it like wasabi then?
it's quite different from wasabi. Wasabi goes straight up your sinuses and blows the top of your head off. This just sneakily fills your mouth and you feel it in the back of your throat. So it's, I mean, if you're used to eating hot things, you probably say, oh, that's just nice. But if you're not used to eating hot things, you might think, oh, that was a bit hot. And if it's too hot for you, what can I give you? Because the antidote is not water, it's sweet. So I should probably get some jam in case.
It's actually really nice.
It is, that's the aromatics. Wait for it. Another local. And
Kind of like tomatoes.
It does.
Cherry or little passion fruit.
and just to show you that it's good, but don't expect it to be sweet.
They look like little matunda.
Quandong. So most people have heard of quandong, so this was a quandong jelly that you had.
Oh, here you go. That's the jam we just had.
This is the major
Oh, the
fruiting
jam's
tree
made
here in the southwest. And we look forward to September and October. So it's first a bit, but these are frozen fresh fruits, so they're a little bit moister than if you were just eating it straight off the tree. But when you taste it, the first taste is a little bit dry, tart, and only a little bit fruity. But they're not unpleasant. I really like them. Okay. These little sweet berries called munchries. These are like little apple flavoured berries. They're very nice. Now another two locals. This is bush tomatoes.
Okay.
These are a true tomato, but these are dried and they get called dried bush tomatoes or desert raisins. And when you first eat them, you get those really intense caramelised raisiny flavours. But keep it in your mouth, moisten it up, move it around,
That is better.
and then you'll taste the sweetness and tomato flavours coming through.
I don't mind it, but it's
So
not
quite strong.
something that I would enrich to as a
Yes.
fruit.
Yeah, yeah.
Munchries. Munchries. They don't grow
not too
here
sure.
in WA, but we have a similar berry, which you
That's why
will
they make jam
find
of it.
in the
That's why they make
bush,
jam out of it.
coming
Jam,
sort of
the jam. Jam will have sugar in it.
No, so maybe that's why they make jam
Or
out
the
of it.
different pinheads, which also have a small green
Apple berry.
berry that tastes a bit appley. They grow in South Australia and Victoria. They grow along the limestone coast.
Those are better.
Oh, that's
They're
nice.
better than fruit. It tastes good.
And the next one I'll do is sandalwood nuts. Everybody's heard of sandalwood oil, but did you know you could eat the nuts? It's our local tree nut. Very
That's
tasty.
sandalwood.
And
No, this one is bush tomato.
delicious.
I love bush
And
tomato.
so good for you. Like all of these things, some of our foods
Bush tomato.
are just so good for you. And this one was medicine for arthritis.
Wow.
So we would eat it, but we would crush it into a paste and apply it to sore joints as well. So sandalwood nuts coming round.
That's good. Macaroon and fruit. Bitter.
Yeah, it is.
A relish there that was made locally by somebody who grows them on their property.
With nuts.
Okay.
And he started making his relish using a tomato as a base, a normal tomato.
Doesn't taste like much.
And he started off using, 20% desert
macadamia.
raisins in it. And it was just too strong and bitter.
Look at this.
And he actually,
Really how much of it
to
tastes.
make it taste good, he only had to use 5%.
Texture's got a macadamia, yeah.
Because of the strength of flavour. Otherwise, it just and don't when you're
Flavourless.
using it in your cooking, put it in towards the end because if you put it in too soon, it'll become bitter. And you can crush it up or have it as a whole snack. Now, what's coming round next here is some roasted wattle seed. This is a local wattle. This is Acacia cyclops that grows along the coast here. And you can smell that one. You can taste it if you wish. It's nutty. It's really nutty. When it's a darker roast like Acacia Victoria is often really dark roast. It takes on those really coffee, mocha, hazelnut flavours of the rose. It's really nice.
Interesting flavors.
Trigger hay fever and things like the wattle flower does?
No, not the seed. But you have to be careful with that. You know what you're doing with wattle seed because we've got about 1,100 different acacia species here in Australia, but only about 100 of them are edible.
So that's wattle seed?
That's the roasted ground wattle seeds. That's Acacia cyclops.
Acacia cyclops. Yep.
Yeah. But, normally if you buy wattle seed in the shop, you're going to get Acacia Victoriae. So there's about 100 edible ones. So don't just attack the wattle at the end of the garden because they're legumes and the alkaloids in them can be very nasty.
Oh, I just heard that.
Yeah. Sorry?
They're a little round seed, not like a mustard seed.
This is them.
Very nutty.
That's
Nice, I
Acacia
like it.
cyclops. So we can pass those around.
reminds me
That's the actual seed. This is last
A bit like
season.
sesame.
So
Yeah,
the
bit like-
mixture of something,
orange,
yeah.
they have a
Yeah.
red arrow.
Nice, I like that.
Hazelnut.
So it's like the little
Yeah.
wing at the
Very
back.
nutty for sure.
The wing that carries them in the wind. When they start off, they're bright red. And so it looks like an eye, so that's where they get the name Acacia cyclops. And the pod sort of twists, yeah. So you walk around the coast, you walk through the bush, and now I tell you about these things, you'll say, oh, there's an Acacia cyclops, I know what that is.
Yep.
Or you'll walk along the sand dunes and think, there's a bit of native spinach.
I think.
So the wattle seed you do have to be a lot more careful about because it is, it can, I don't know if anybody's died away.
So which one is this one?
Acacia cyclops.
Oh, that's the one. Okay, right.
Yeah, so it's the same as the one that was roasted on the ground. So that's local.
Oh,
It's a
Now we're
hard
going to
seed.
try some limes.
oh, they're
So
hard. Can't eat that.
sadly, none of them grow in WA, but these ones are actually grown in plantation in WA.
It's hard.
You can't eat it.
I eat it. So it's good. Yeah.
So these ones are the ruby limes or the red centre limes. They don't grow naturally in the red centre. In fact, they are a hybrid developed by the CSIRO from a finger lime. So this is a cross between a finger lime and a Rangpur lime. And you get the red centre lime. They're not to everybody's taste. They're sort of grapefruity, but they've got a different taste to them. But I'll cut them up a little bit so that you can see if you like them. Yes.
The nursery on the other side.
Variations of finger limes.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they go from white to all shades of yellow, to limey greens, through to hunter greens, pinks, reds, dark pinks, dark reds, and what's inside will vary as well. You know, you get the white ones, the green ones, the pink ones, the red ones. So, that's why they're an absolute favourite with chefs, because you don't have to work hard to have the success with the finger lime. Use it as a garnish, and that's what they would get used for mostly. And Rene Redzepi, when he was here, made a bouquet of finger limes by taking all these different finger limes he could find, cutting them in half, squeezing them so that the these little citrus caviar things all popped out. And so he had all these like different flowers. He's so, incredible. Yeah, I know. When you see some of the work that he's done, with his chocolate earth and all the little things that he puts in it. So yes, that's what you're looking for with the finger lime. So I'll do some of those next.
Colour is amazing.
Yeah, so these ones are very special.
Sorry, what was the chef's name?
Rene Redzepi from Noma.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll have a tasting. We'll have a tasting if you can stay. And let's cut up some more of those
That's
finger
red centre
limes.
as well.
And I'll have to repurpose some of these plates.
Tangy.
Some of those.
You need your jam now.
Yeah, new jam.
So where do they
That is well a bit
It's very grapefruit. I like
I
it.
quite like it, yeah.
The red centre
Sour,
limes,
very
being a
sour.
hybrid, don't have a natural habitat. The finger limes, again, from Queensland.
Yeah.
They're grown in plantation here. And to tell you, to show you how funny the native, any fruits are, they grow them down in Pemberton.
Oh, right.
I know, so they'll potentially grow anywhere. They do take about 5 years to settle in
Yeah.
and start producing a good amount of fruit.
I never think to cook with them.
And these, of course, have come out of the freezer and not
use it,
being a
yeah.
warm day. It's got a bit cold.
I think I would have needed a little bit of gin to go with that previous one. That would be very nice.
That would be actually really nice.
Just gin would be
Gin with any of these limes, it's beautiful.
and even the peppers, the
Pepperberry, yeah.
Desert lime.
They're the most amazing snack food. They're very tangy, but yummy. And in summer, I like them frozen.
Oh, good idea. Oh, wow. No.
Have some sweet colours.
Oh, my taste buds
That's the
are
finger lime.
popping.
Finger lime. Let's see.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Oh, that's a desert lime. So desert
Lime as well.
Yes. Yeah. Tangy. Yeah, tangy.
Definitely fresh into your mouth.
So that's the desert apple.
Yeah.
But they're
Yeah, it's
lemons.
amazing, the desert lime.
Is it bitter? The one like
Cut
that?
up. That's cut up. Wow.
Meat and the juice is sweet.
Perfect.
I have that and then I'll go.
So they may look like a kumquat, but they're more yellow than a kumquat. And they're another CSIRO invention. So these are again crossed with a finger lime, so obviously a yellow finger lime. And they're crossed with a camello, which in itself is a hybrid between a mandarin and a kumquat.
Ah.
So there's lots of hybridization going on here. So again, each one.
Should do one some more.
That's so nice.
Everybody has.
And a type of
Yeah.
still called a type of lime.
Sunrise lime.
Sunrise lime. Thank you.
DNA and everything else is pointing to the fact that this one is probably the great grandma of all citrus plants in the world.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Wow.
the desert
The
apple.
desert lime.
Desert lime.
Yeah. So, current thinking is, superseding
Looks
the
like
idea
the-
that citrus
got the
fruits
seeds,
came from China. All the indicators pointing further south and pointing to this one. Just like all songbirds originated in Australia. Really?